Hi, everyone. Welcome. We are going to record, just so everybody knows. We'll give a few minutes for everybody to filter in here. A few more.
Angela.
Yes, Robert.
Hey, I can take this moment to thank the person that reminds me to get my grants signed. Thank you.
Anytime. You're welcome. Thanks, everybody, for being here. So just a quick framing as people are still popping in. The goal of this session is to offer something that Preschool Promise has wanted to do but struggles to try and offer when we have as many grantees as we have, as many sites as we have, of doing a smaller group, sort of informal office hours style conversational Q&A. That is what we're hoping to do today. So and with that, this is our largest group. This one had the most demand. So we will try to do our best to make sure that everybody is heard. You can feel free to use the chat. Also feel free to just jump in if there's an opening. We'll always have the caveat that we may not have every single answer available today, but we'll do our best. I've got grant manuals up on the other screen ready to go and some TA documents. So we'll answer as much as we can, and what we can't, we'll try and document in the chat and get back to you as soon as possible. And then just a reminder that today's session, we're specifically focusing on grant manual changes and that who to contact document that we shared in the kickoff. If you have questions that are not related to that, if there's time and space at the end, totally fine. We'll try and answer what we can. But if not, if we have a lot of questions that are specific to this topic, we want to be respectful of the people that signed up because we were addressing this one. So we're going to try and stick to that. So I think that's a little bit of framing. Dana, I see a lot of familiar names and a few familiar faces, but just in case, Dana, do you want to introduce yourself really quickly?
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Dana Young, and I'm the Preschool Promise Program Manager here at the ELD. So welcome. So we're super excited just to have these mini sessions. We're hoping to have more throughout the program year. So definitely English and Spanish. We'll be offering one in Spanish later on from 5:30 to 6:30. So just bear with us as we get into the rhythm of just offering more of this Q&A office hour type of questions. We try to go ahead and combine all of our kind of bundle up all of our communication with our Gov delivery, with our YouTube tutorials, with your SharePoint site. And then this was kind of a key element that we struggled a little bit last program year to go ahead and execute, but we're super excited to be able to offer more of this as the program year continues on. And obviously, as always, feel free to send us an email or give us a call. You can always schedule a meeting either individually with myself or with Angela or Anthony or anybody else in the team there if you have a specific questions, because we know with our mixed delivery, Preschool Promise works just a little bit different in each of the different settings that we have. So welcome. But this meeting is yours, and we are here to answer questions and make sure that you have a successful implementation. So go ahead, Angela.
Yeah, I'll introduce myself quickly. Angela Stinson, Communication and Stakeholder Engagement Coordinator, specifically for Preschool Promise this year, which I'm really looking forward to. Just being able to focus on Preschool Promise specifically. So happy to be here and happy to answer what I can. And Dana and I will try and take turns, support each other as we need to. Does anybody want to, also, you're of course not obligated, but please feel free to have your camera on if you'd like to. But yes, the session is being recorded, so have that in mind. Anybody want to kick us off with a question about grant manual changes or who to contact?
Jody Durfee. I am at Umatilla Memorial Head Start. I just realized you emailed me back today about a question. So I'm new to Head Start. I have like 11 years of experience at school district. And so I'm really familiar with ODE and how learning all this new stuff and being told, oh, you're in charge of this grant, you're in charge of this grant. So just trying to, because I had asked you, oh, this says that we were supposed to order the money from Egan's first before I, did my worksheet, but I went ahead and did it anyway. Go ahead. So yeah, just learning the ins and outs of the grant is what I'm here to find out about.
Welcome, Jody. Thanks for being here. Anyone else? Feel free to use the chat as well. I see somebody's got a question in process from through a direct message. And okay, so one question I see in the chat via direct message is, can we talk about the requirements for hearing screenings? Dana, do you want to talk about health screenings, hearing screenings, visual screenings as they apply to Preschool Promise?
Yeah, we can definitely talk about that with Preschool Promise, just because where we are in our implementation, hearing screenings are not required. Neither is like dental or vision hearings. We do know that because we have some previous Preschool Promise grantees, like that's something that was already available and was already offered like through their previous relationship with the hubs. So what we said for this implementation is you're not required, but by all means, if you are able to go ahead and do it, please do so. We do know that vision, hearing, and dental play a very important role, especially when some of our little ones are having social and emotional behaviors in the classroom. Sometimes it's because maybe they're not able to see, they're not able to hear. So it's not a requirement, but we have a lot of programs that are executing that. We try to go ahead and capture that in our end of the year report. But you guys are definitely welcome to go ahead and offer that. We know that some of the grantees may have partnerships in the community, or they may be borrowing those machines to go ahead and do the vision screening. So you're definitely able to implement, but it's not a requirement of Preschool Promise.
Thanks, Dana. And thanks for the questions that I see in the chat as well. We'll just kind of try and go in order as best as we can. So the follow-up question that was sent directly was, are there any requirements regarding classroom observation? So there is in the grant manual some outlined monitoring expectations. Right now, those are in place kind of as we're building out our monitoring system, but there's not like how licensing has a regular schedule, a cadence of visits. That's not in place for Preschool Promise, but I will say that you may or may not have received a notice from TRI about an ERS assessment coming up. That is a classroom observation. We do ask that you participate. It's a really fantastic tool to look at classroom environments and teacher-child interactions. And the goal is really to reflect back to you as the program about, here's opportunity, here's where we see really strong practices, here's where we see opportunities for growth. So that's the goal with that one. So there is some monitoring that's outlined in the manual, but it's not specifically built out. Dana, can you take the next one, which is, if a program has to close because of COVID, do they need to make up the hours to get to 900 hours?
Yeah, that has been, a question, and we know that it's going to go ahead and happen a lot. You're not required, though we have a lot of programs that do try to go ahead and do that and try to go ahead and make up for those hours if it allows them in their calendar. But we know that many of you, especially because of our delay in our grant agreements and everything going out, So definitely not a requirement. Make sure that you are keeping note of that, because we'll need to go ahead and address that. And like in our end of the year report, what was the impact on your program? But definitely if it does allow you within your schedule for you to go ahead and do that. And just a little bit about TRI and when they may be reaching out to you. Some of our grantees who were in the previous implementation of Preschool Promise, they will reach out by TRI to go ahead and do an ECHRS observation. So that's more for your environment. Just go ahead and check that out. What I want to go ahead and say is that kind of threw some of our grantees off. Some of them were like, whoa, the state is going to come and check on my environment. This is for continuous quality improvement. We're really just trying to go ahead and get a gauge of like what's going out there in order to go ahead and better support you. So if you were one of those lucky ones that was selected, yay. That is going to be a great thing that's going to be available to you, and then continue to go ahead and work with the CCRNR. But we're not looking for any kind of like score. And if you're not at this score, you're going to be in trouble. I think for some reason the intention was like, yay, you're selected, but somehow it created a little bit of anxiety. And then it also created some like, what about me? How come I was not selected to go ahead and participate that? So we kind of got both. We are looking, especially with Preschool Promise, we have 174 grantees, 251 sites, 250 some sites, and then you can imagine the amount of classrooms. So that is something that right now for continuous quality improvement, we're trying to, okay, what will it take to go ahead and do an ECHRS in all of our program? What will it take to do class in all of our programs? So this year is going to be really focused on kind of us understanding, kind of like developing that process when you're trying to go ahead and do so many observations. And then on the other one, just how do we support you to make sure that is sufficient for you as well. So just keep in mind, any kind of observations this program year is purely for continuous quality improvement. Is for you to go ahead and continue engaging and get the supports that you need for successful implementation.
Yeah. And then I think Lauren in the chat was next, and then we'll jump over to Robert's hand up. Thanks, Robert. Lauren asked, how should we report attendance for families who have self-selected to only attend part of the offered PSP days and hours? And who would we need to contact to share this information? I think we generally ask that you share this information with us just because we want to know the family's reasoning. We do have several families where the child might participate in like an early intervention, early childhood special education classroom 2 days a week, and then participate in Preschool Promise the other 3 days. And that's absolutely acceptable. If you are meeting the needs of a child through an alternative schedule, wonderful. So, you would alter your planned attendance for that child. So if that, that's the plan for that child, they're only attending Preschool Promise 3 days a week, it won't count against that child's individual attendance record. That's a plan that's meeting that family's needs at this time. Robert, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. So we're really proud of this mixed service delivery program that we're offering here in Eastern Oregon. And, we mix up the Head Start kiddos and the Preschool Promise kiddos, and we're working on some private pay school district children as well. But we've done it to ourselves. We are doing a lot of reporting. And I'm wondering, like with the OPK reporting, they have a similar dashboard and they have a smart sheet system. I'm wondering if there's a way to streamline that between the two programs.
Absolutely. That's something that we're continuously working on. Jaya, she's in our program unit and she's leading a lot of our data and reporting. You guys, some of you may see her name pop up, but that is one of the biggest goals, because we know that many of you are double funded, triple funded, lots of funding. So it's like, how do we do that? I think right now, just the fact that we're using the same platform in certain cases is kind of a little step going towards, but we're definitely looking at working towards more alignment, definitely.
Baby steps, as they say. Yeah, but good. I can imagine, Robert. I can definitely imagine. Denise asked, are there any examples or samples of parent orientation plans or parent handbooks that we could model those documents from? At an ELD level, I don't we don't have any immediate templates that we could provide, but this is an opportunity to partner with a CCR&R who either could have really strong examples of what that looks like, or if your particular QIS coach doesn't, they meet internally across CCR&Rs and do a community of practice where they can reach out to other CCR&R coaches and quality improvement specialists across the state and say, hey, I'm looking for this resource. Have you found a good one? So I would point in the direction of the CCR&R for examples of strong parent handbooks or parent orientation plans. Luke asked, regarding developmental screenings, the ASQ, for example, grant manual requires us to do those within 45 days with parent permission. What happens if parents are not communicative to help us perform those screenings within 45 days? Also, if a child is enrolled in year 1 and does one of those screenings, are we required to do another in year 2 with the same child? Luke has one final question. I'm debating whether we break it up or answer it all at once, but finally, what about children who already come into our program with an IFSP? We had this question before. Are we required to do a developmental screening, even if they've already been identified to receive individualized services? Dana, you can try to tackle that one, or we could co-tackle it. This is a 3-parter.
We can go tackle it. I think that, I'll go ahead and tackle the second one as far as does the child need to go ahead and have it if they're on their 2nd year, and they will need to go ahead and have that because it's part of a new grant, new requirement, new way of doing things. So we haven't got to the point to where if the child was already in the program, then you don't need to go ahead and do it for the 2nd year. You will still need to do that as part of your grant requirement. The first question, just now I'm going blank because I forgot.
If a parent's not, because we require parent permission to do a developmental screening, and if a parent either could be not cooperating or just flat out refusing this, what's the expected response from the
if they're refusing it, we definitely cannot have a parent, force a parent to go ahead and do it. I always go back to why, right? Why is it that they're refusing? What is it that we can do? More of an engagement with a parent to go ahead and help them out, but you will never go ahead and force it upon a family for some reason they don't want to. And then the third one, Angela.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of what Dana said, I think just as a general recommendation, document. Like, you attempted, here's the conversation you had with the family, here's ultimately how they responded. So just some generalized advice there. And then the piece about a child who comes into the program with an IFSP. Okay, we did respond to this exact question with another program, and I'm trying to remember how we identified it. If you believe that circumstances have changed and the IFSP is not addressing all of the identified needs that you're observing, then it is appropriate to do a follow-up screening and then potentially ask for the IFSP to be reassessed by the agency that helps create it. But if it's been done very recently, and there's already a very clear awareness of what this child needs, and how to best serve them, then I believe we've said, it makes sense not to do it in that case and document as well. I am going to follow up just to make sure that I'm being consistent with what we've said to one other program that asked that. So I'll put a more formal response in the chat. And then I have a direct message question that says, are there any guidelines about what documentation should look like? For example, templates for the various requirements for like ASQ completion, parent conferences, orientation. So are there any guidelines around what documentation should look like for those specific requirements?
As far as here at the state, like us having templates, like there's no templates. This is where we, go back to our CCR&R and make sure that they're there to go ahead and provide you with those reports and templates or any kind of assistance that you may need. What comes to mind is that what we're looking to go ahead and launch this program year, if time allows it and everything goes well, will be a playbook. And it's going to be like right now you have the preschool promise, your grant manual, right? That talks to you about the requirements, but it doesn't necessarily say, but what does it look like in practice? Like what should I be looking at from the preschool promise lens? So we are looking to go ahead and launch a playbook later on in the year that will actually go ahead and take that preschool promise quality requirements, and it will actually give you guidance on what it's supposed to look like in practice. This is obviously lots of collaboration with the CCR&R. This last year, we only made that playbook available to the CCR&R. So now that they've actually gone through it, they've been able to go ahead and give us feedback. We're looking forward to go ahead and making it available to grantees later on. But right now, please connect with your CCR&R in regards to any of your preschool promise quality requirements. I can ask, just this other question, like if a family has COVID, how do we log attendance in our reports? Does it count against your program's attendance? And that is an excuse absence, especially if they have COVID and they're not able to go ahead and attend the program. But what we are asking all of the programs to do is like, we still need to be able to track us as a state, what was the impact of COVID in attendance? So what you're going to be like submitting like later on, probably on like the third quarter, is you're going to go ahead and provide us with a report on like how many excuse absence that you gave out in your program and what was the reasons for those excuse absence, which in one of the cases, it may be COVID. You ended up giving lots and lots of excuse absence. So it's not going to impact your attendance like percentage on a monthly basis. They're not considered unexcused absence. They're considered excused. So therefore it's not going to impact the attendance, but we do want to be able to track that. And it's going to be more through like what were, tell us the percentage of excuse absence that you gave out and the reason. So just kind of stay tuned for that. And go ahead, Angela.
Yeah. And I do also want to just piggyback quickly and say, I know that we've shared that notice about making sure that providers are documenting the reasons behind excused absences, but I don't know that I think we need to share that broadly. So that's on the horizon to let providers know that we're hoping to collect data around excused absences specifically so that we can strike that balance that Dana talked about of not counting COVID related absence against your ADA, but making sure that we're still trying to document how COVID is impacting child attendance in early ed. So I saw a couple things. Would it be possible to have a list of resources for students that speak multiple languages? This is a great ask, and it makes me wonder about your program composition. It sounds very exciting. You mentioned 8 different languages. So we want to be as supportive as possible. The CCR&R potentially could have documents, but if you're looking for something specific, please let us know. I don't know that we have the capability to we can't translate every program's document into each of the languages that you need. It is an allowable expense if you need to hire an outside translation company to meet the needs of the families in the program. And also, there is potential to partner with us or your hub or your CCR&R if you need to facilitate a conversation in another language with a provider. So if you have a specific question, I think maybe reach out. And then Michelle wanted to clarify, unless you are selected, you will not receive a classroom observation. So just to specify, what I mentioned earlier, the ERS assessments this year, the environmental rating scale assessments, were for a specific, we did already notify the programs that we plan on offering those assessments to. So if you did not receive that notice, you will not receive an ERS assessment. That said, the manual is pretty broad about the agency being able to kind of determine when they think a classroom level observation is needed, and what kind of notice is required to enact that. So as I mentioned, there's not, at this time, we don't have other pre-planned assessments, classroom observations, but that doesn't nullify what's in the grant manual as far as the agency being, if there's an identified reason to visit a program, the agency still has that authority in the grant.
Just to go ahead and add, we may have some of those programs that were selected that for some reason they're not able to go ahead and do it, because as we remember, this is for continuous quality improvement. So at that point, we will be saying like, hey, like Robert's not able to do it, could Cheryl go ahead and do it? Does that make sense? So then we'll go ahead and go down to another grantee to go ahead and do that. And we are looking into looking at our funding and seeing, can we do more? Because while at the same time, there was a little bit of anxiety when we sent out the notice, there was also a lot of excitement from other providers saying, I want actually someone to come and do that. So we are looking to go ahead and do more. It's just a matter of can we go ahead and do everybody this year, set another sample? So just stay tuned for more information on ECHRS in class.
Yep. And then Dee asked, if a child is not attending the school after they've been enrolled, how many days do we need to keep the child in our program? And I did reference the grant manual for this, that a grantee may disenroll a child that has been absent for more than 15 days if they have made multiple attempts to contact the family during the absence. The grantee needs to notify ELD and the hub of the vacancy within 5 business days so the slot can be filled. So a grantee must approve any leave of absence that is beyond 15 consecutive program days. And then if it is longer than 25 consecutive days, you do want to make sure to contact ELD and get prior approval for that as well. So I'll pitch this next one to you, Dana. Is there a document somewhere that has a list of what is considered an excused absence?
There is no document. Our grant manual is pretty broad. It only speaks to medical type of excused absence, but definitely that's something that we can make note of and be able to go ahead and provide maybe a future resource on that. But most of the time it's going to be a medical reason why it will be excused. We have seen in some cases where maybe the family needs to go ahead and travel outside the country because of immigration, right? We will go ahead and obviously provide an excuse absence for that. So it's always okay, just looking at the situation and the parent, if the parent's calling they want to go on a vacation, that's a little bit different, right? But we know that sometimes circumstances occur, whether there was a death in the family or something's going on. But we'll go ahead and make note of that and see if we can go ahead and provide that as a resource in the future.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea because like Dana said, I think at this point, it's kind of an excused absence is an absence that a grantee has excused. That's kind of where it stands right now. And I think that answers one of the later questions in here. So a couple folks, okay, there is some questions in here that are a little topic adjacent. So I'm going to save those for the end if that's okay. Okay, so vacancies. So a program might still have there are some vacancies in one of the programs. Hub has not approved all families to enroll, and the vacancies are now beyond 30 days. So looking at the grant manual guidance, this would require a plan on how to fill the vacancies. And just okay, so what should a grantee be doing if the hub isn't providing candidates for the vacancies? And related to that, the grant manual notes that grant funds could potentially be reduced. If the hub is unsuccessful in providing candidates for enrollment, are we at risk of losing slots that we were awarded? And I know Dana and I have been chatting and talked about this topic before. So I don't know, Dana, do you want to try and respond to that now, or do you want to put a pin in it for the moment? I'll leave that up to you.
Yeah, you know, I know that to just real quick, like what are we doing in regards to that is that our like first monthly report technically just came in because it was barely due like on October the 15th for many of the programs to start in September. So right now we here at the ELD, we're looking at the data, gathering some data as far as like how is enrollment going across the state with Preschool Promise, and not just with Preschool Promise, but with our other publicly funded programs. I think that sometimes Preschool Promise, because of our magnitude, we're like, oh, what's going on? And it's like whatever we do with the Preschool Promise, like grantee as far as the process, we also need to go ahead and create some alignment with our other publicly funded programs. So right now, really the expectation, while you have that process like on the menu, and we've been getting some feedback about some grantees feeling really anxious about it. It's like, whoa, like I don't have all my slots full. When are you going to go ahead and take these slots away from me? That's not the case. You know, we understand that we were late on our grant agreement. We understand that we still have COVID. We understand that, you know, a lot of our enrollment still goes through our early learning hubs, and they still need time to go ahead and get up and running and go through the processes. So really our expectation right now is that our grantees are working in collaboration with the hub on getting those slots filled, right? Making sure that you're working on collaborative like strategies for recruitment, making sure that you're documenting, right? Documenting your interactions and everything that's going on. But right now, like stay tuned. Like here internally, we're trying to go ahead and kind of see the lay of the land as far as like what's going on with enrollment, not just with Preschool Promise, but with other programs too. So right now, just keep working with your hub. I don't know, Angela, if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think that's great. And I think the only thing I would tack on is, you know, stay tuned, because we do want to be really clear and really outline this for you in a way that makes you feel confident about your relationship and your ability to collaborate with the hub, and the timeline for if and when ELD would look at a reduction of slots or funding. So just be on the lookout for that. Blanca asked a question about a child with shared custody, which I'll try and, you know, not knowing the specifics, try and give a general overview. So we've had this come up a few different times. So in general, a child with a court arranged custody agreement will identify one parent who's ultimately responsible for making a decision related to the child's education. And so so often what you'll find if custody has already been determined is that even if there's a 50-50 parenting plan, there's one parent who gets the ultimate say in where the child attends a program. I won't say that I've seen every custody agreement out there, but this is just my experience and my understanding. So we would lean on that primary custodial parent making a determination about the child attending the program or not. Now we do, of course, things with custody can certainly get muddy. And if you have a situation where a family is in the middle of determining custody, ideally they can get to a point where they agree on where the child is attending their early care and education program. But if not, if you have a situation where dad really wants child to attend a certain program and mom is doing homeschool or something else during her parenting hours, we have generally leaned, although we ask you to communicate it with us, toward allowing that child to participate in the program with their limited schedule while the custody is being determined. Mm-hmm. So, and knowing that custody can be a lingering issue, but one that ultimately hopefully is resolved through the court system, and we can land somewhere with finality about where that child is attending preschool or not attending preschool. But we would generally lean toward meeting that family where they're at in the midst of custody determination. Dana, would you follow up on that with any other info?
No, I think that was great. And I mean, the only thing that I wanted to add is that we've been seeing some custody situations a lot lately. A lot of parents are stressed, whether you have one parent that wants the kiddo to attend, preschool promise, the other one doesn't. So, I mean, so thank you for all that you do for our kiddos, because we have seen some pretty sad stories come up here.
Maggie asked, is it a possibility that we enroll our own children versus the hub having that responsibility?
Yeah. That's a good question. Right now, how we're set up with our preschool promise model. And, I look at the word enroll and I'm looking at Robert and I'm like, okay, let's provide some clarification on some of the wording here. Because I think the word enroll got us a little bit twisted last time. So for our relationship with the hubs, our early learning hubs are supposed to be there to help recruit for all publicly funded programs, right? With our implementation with Preschool Promise, we know that we needed, we wanted to reduce some of the burden from our grantees to go ahead and this is our first time contracting with the state. There is a new grant, getting the kiddos up and running, everything. We knew that we needed some help and services to go ahead and provide the eligibility, selection, and placement. So those three services, all of our grantees do enrollment, which is enrolling the families into your program. For those three services, we do have the hubs. At this point, the only grantees that are kind of quote unquote are doing those services themselves would be our OPK and Head Start programs or tribal. But for right now, we do have our early learning hubs providing that eligibility, selection, and placement. So I can definitely make note of that. But right now, because of the magnitude of our program, that's kind of how the system has been set up. It also helps the family too, by being able to go ahead and go to one central point to go ahead and apply for Preschool Promise versus going to so many different places to go ahead and get into Preschool Promise. So there's also that the benefit for the families, but definitely continue that collaboration. Thank you.
That's awesome to hear, Robert, that things are working well and conversations were very healthy. That's awesome. So in a direct message, I got the question. I got two questions, and I'll try and hit both of them and give everybody time to think of more questions to put in the chat box or to raise your hand or just speak up and let us know. So one question was around SharePoint. So if we did upload more than 500 emails at the start of the program year to our user list and sent all those invitations out. So if your email was identified on your application for Preschool Promise this year, an email was attempted to reach, we attempted to reach you by email. I know that technology is fraught with complications sometimes, and folks, either it could have been routed to their spam folder or something else mysterious is going on. If you don't have access to SharePoint yet, please do reach out to the PSP inbox, psp@state.or.us. We do a new user upload at the end of each week. I put an Excel sheet together and I hand it off to the Oregon Department of Ed IT staff who are responsible and have the authority that we unfortunately internally within our program don't have to invite new users to the site. So please, if you've asked several times and you've been on an upload list several times and you still aren't getting that invitation, please note that as well. Or let us, sometimes a screenshot of what you're seeing when you click on this SharePoint link is really helpful for helping IT staff troubleshoot what's going on for you. And then the other question was around, and Dana, I'll take a swing, but please add on if you can. On page 9 of the grant manual, there's a very brief section about transition support. So it says that grantees should support families of enrolled children during transitions to other early learning settings, including kindergarten. Grantees must document transition plans. Transition plans must include evidence of parent involvement. And so the question was, what's required regarding a transition plan? And I think it is fairly fairly broad per the grant manual, but a CCR&R is a great resource for what that can look like in best practice. We do, transitioning children to kindergarten specifically is a great goal and a thing to have it in the back of your mind and to plan for as a preschool promise or as a preschool program in general, and whether you were receiving preschool promise grant funding or not. So definitely something to feel really confident that you have a transition plan that you've developed and feel great about and know how you're documenting that. Dana, would you add anything beyond that?
No, I think that sounds good.
Okay. And then Lauren asked, is there or could there be a checklist made similar to the report checklist that lists the other grant requirements and when and or how often they are due? For example, things like the ASQ, parent conferences, assessments, etc. And Becky agrees. I think that's a great idea.
Yes, that's definitely something that we can, for future resources. And it wouldn't surprise me if some of the grantees probably already have that made too. I'm looking at Robert and Robert's like, so you can send there. But also definitely, go ahead and put a plug. Please do collaborate amongst each other, right? Because I think Preschool Promise looks, we're a program, it looks a little bit different environments. So please do not forget to go ahead and connect with your colleagues there.
Yeah, and then a question, and I definitely have my own interpretation, but for sites with multiple classrooms, do all teachers need to meet the lead teacher requirement as it's stated in the grant manual, or could there be a lead teacher eligible staff member on site with staff that qualify as teacher through Office of Child Care? So for example, you might have a step 11 lead teacher who is in the program, and helping maybe in different classrooms, but then classroom A has 18 children and a step 7 teacher as defined by OCC. Dana, do you want to take that one or would you like me to?
So as far as if you have multiple classrooms, your lead teachers have to meet the Preschool Promise qualifications for education. So it doesn't, so that's why it's super important that when you get your Preschool Promise slots, oftentimes I get, calls to say, well, I got 10, can I put 5 here and 5 here? And it's like, yes, you can, but then that means that all the Preschool Promise quality requirements have to be implemented in both of the classrooms. Does that make sense? So really, we definitely value and we welcome mixed delivery and blending classrooms. But you go ahead and keep that in mind that when you are doing that, if you have 3 different classrooms and they all have 3 Preschool Promise children in there, they have to meet the minimum qualifications for lead teachers. And what was the second part of the question, Angela?
I think that was the crux of it. There's just offering an example. And I 100%, yeah, I would agree with you 100%. The intent is that there's a Preschool Promise qualified lead teacher in every classroom environment within the program. And the only time I can think of when we've offered an exception, well, I should say 2 things. One, when we were at very early COVID state of emergency and people were trying to super reduce group sizes, we did have some wiggle room there, but not now. I would say if you have we want to be responsive to the staffing crisis that's happening right now. And so if you have someone who is really close to meeting Preschool Promise lead teacher requirements, but they need a little bit more professional development and time, request a waiver, talk through your plan with us because we want to work with you and work with that staff member and get them professional development is part of our goal here. So please do reach out. Ideally, you have a PSP qualified lead teacher in every single classroom, but if you don't, let us know and let us know your plan to get there. Okay. Becky asked, is there a list of contact information for all Preschool Promise providers?
No, not yet. We do have right now, but thank you for whoever asked the question, because that reminds me to remind all of you to make sure to go ahead and submit your site information. So for many of you, that's what's going to go ahead and help us be able to go ahead and get to a full, just like all of the list of our Preschool Promise grantees with their contact information. So please do make sure, if you haven't done it, to go ahead and submit your site information. We did receive a message this morning that some grantees, actually, if you haven't submitted your site information, you should have received a reminder last night that says, hey, you're still missing your site information. You need to go ahead and get that in. And for some of you, that may have been confusing because you're like, I already submitted. Why are they sending me this reminder? You may have submitted, you may have used the wrong form, because we found that some grantees were using the form from last year. So we've deactivated everything from last year. So if you got a reminder, it's because you really have not submitted your site information, and we really need to get that in. I cannot stress that enough, because that allows us to making sure that we have all the right information, be able to connect all the dots here. So please do that, and we'll go ahead and make kind of a list for that, because that has been brought up before. It's like, can we get a list of all the Preschool Promise grantees so I know who to contact and start, creating dialogue among other grantees. And also for the parents, we are looking to have more information on our website about the different Preschool Promise sites across the state too.
Yep. We got a direct question, and I won't get into the details, because so anytime there's a child with special needs, whether it's regarding developmental concerns or behavioral concerns or et cetera, the question around, like, is Preschool Promise the best fit for this child, or how do I support this child appropriately, is going to come up. And I'll just say, as a general group answer, the first step is to touch base with your CCR&R and really find out what resource, make a plan for assessing the needs of the child if that hasn't happened yet, and if the child is already receiving special services, making a plan for or is receiving special services but maybe not adequately, talk with them about that. The inclusionary support section of the grant manual is much more defined this year, as far as like step-by-step things that we want to make sure that grantees are thinking about and acting on to try and maintain continuity of care for a child. That said, if a child has an IFSP and the family is supportive of that child receiving specialized services outside of the PSP classroom, we're in full support of a child being co-enrolled in an early intervention specialized classroom and a Preschool Promise classroom, if that's what's determined to be the best fit for that child. If you talk to your CCR&R and you're still struggling, absolutely feel free to reach out to us, and we'll try and support where we can. And then Dana, I should say, is there anything else I know that's always a tricky topic, always feels very specific to children and their families and hard to answer broadly, but would you add anything to that?
No, I think that is definitely, an area of the grant manual that we'll continuously look at. We received some feedback that is a lot better from last year, so that's good. But definitely let us know if there's some confusion about it.
Yep. Dee asked if I would like to set up an individual meeting with you for additional questions. Who should I reach out? And you can email us, preschoolpromisepsp@state.or.us, and we will do our best to try and get that set up with you. as soon as we can.
Yeah, thank you. Can I ask,
Please.
because we have staff rotation and we're looking for a new site director, I may not be able to transfer all information because I'm still learning as well. So there might be a list of questions that I'll work with new staff or new lead teacher. And then I would like to know who to reach out and what kind of, like to the right people in terms of like funding, grant, program expectations. So which email should I send to?
Yeah, I think psp@state.or.us is, while you absolutely can individually email Dana or myself or your grant manager, Anthony, PSP, every Preschool Promise staff member has access to that specific email. And so that is quick. That's where we're often able to address folks' needs as quickly as possible. So I highly recommend that. And certainly I think that's a great example of when a one-on-one meeting or training really makes sense, is if you have, new leadership that are still learning what Preschool Promise is and need some grounding in information that the rest of us may have already gotten in the past 2 years. Let's catch that person up. Let's plan a time to do a Preschool Promise deep dive.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that will help a lot because, like I said, I may not have all information, so I'd be better for the new person who take on the leadership role to learn directly from you guys and continue working with the family and the teachers.
Absolutely. Thanks for looking out for that future leadership person, Dee. Appreciate that.
I'm still looking. It's really hard to find the right people.
It is.
Thank you.
Dana, I'll pitch this one to you. Becky asked, following up on Luke's question, for a classroom of 12 children, how many lead teachers are required? If you have more teachers than required, can some of them not meet the requirements?
Sure, great question. If you need one lead teacher, for that classroom, and they still need to go ahead and meet that the educational requirements. So it's not like, oh, I have like 3 teachers. So we don't have to go ahead and have a lead teacher with the requirements. It's really about having that lead teacher. And like I said, definitely don't forget that we do have that waiver for staff qualifications. It's something that we want to go ahead and be responsive to COVID and just the shortage of like teachers in this industry. And I'm sure in other industries as well, this is happening too. But definitely if you are just not able to go ahead and find that lead teacher with the staff qualifications, please go ahead and submit a waiver.
Yep.
Dana, my question was actually if we have more than, so we have like 2 qualified teachers and a 3rd teacher that's a 7. They don't all have to meet the qualifications if you have a teacher, at least one teacher for that group that does.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And I know some people, it is tricky because, we've gotten questions also about like, well, what if they're an aid 1 per licensing? So it is connected but different from licensing. Hopefully that doesn't just make it more confusing, but as long as you have 1 staff member who meets Preschool Promise lead teacher requirements and 1 staff member who meets at least Preschool Promise assistant teacher requirements, you are meeting the intent of the staff qualification section of the grant manual. And then Blanca, to your question about, related, do you need to have an assistant if you have a small group, for example, like 8 preschool children? So per the grant manual, every Preschool Promise classroom should have 2 staff members. Every Preschool Promise classroom should have a lead teacher and an assistant teacher. If this is a tremendous financial burden for your program, we would like to know about it. So that's another opportunity to submit a waiver request and talk about how you're meeting the intent of the rule without meeting the exact requirement in the grant manual. So I know we have just a few minutes left, so we might not get to everything. We'll do our best to follow up via email. Miriam, I know that you're on. If you wouldn't mind making sure that we copy and paste all the messages from the chat, that would be awesome.
Yeah, sure.
Thank
I will
you.
go ahead and do that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mhm.
Dana, Luke asked, the grant manual says we need to notify ELD of staff changes within 14 days. If we contact Office of Child Care, does that count as contacting the ELD, or do we need to contact Preschool Promise separately?
Great question. You will need to go ahead and contact Preschool Promise separately. So just go ahead and send an email to the PSP email.
And then do we have an approved list of assessment tools? The manual notes the need to align with Oregon Early Learning Kindergarten guidelines. Does AEPS meet that requirement? And I believe that is in our drop-down menu. It's TS Gold and APES, if I'm not mistaken, for assessment. But Dana, do we have an approved list of assessment tools, or do we just at this time require that it aligns with the Oregon Early Learning and Kindergarten guidelines?
Yeah, we don't have a list. And, you know, we try to be careful with like a list or anything, because then it's like, are you endorsing a certain type of assessment and stuff? So we're trying not to do that. So it's more like really looking at your manual, working with your CCRNR and say, okay, is the tool that I'm using, does it align? If like when you're reading the grant manual, you may be having some questions and stuff.
So I think this is a great place to wrap up and say thank you so much for attending. We very much appreciate your time. I'm going to put a quick poll up, and the question is just, you know, is this something that was helpful to you and you'd like to have more in the future, or are emails and webinar style meetings sufficing for now? So I'm going to launch that poll, and if you wouldn't mind just submitting that before you leave, that would be super helpful to us. And thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Share the results really quick for those of us that are left on. Can everybody see the results? 15 out of 16 would like more meetings like this. Thanks so much. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.